She's the daughter of one of the greatest baseball players of all time, but that's only part of her story. Her father, Jackie Robinson, broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball in 1947 when he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. After an illustrious career on the field, he worked tirelessly for civil rights when he retired from baseball in 1956. Well, Sharon Robinson turned 13 in 1963, a crucial year for the civil rights movement. And it's the setting of her new book, Child of the Dream, a memoir of 1963. I spoke with Sharon Robinson earlier about her famous dad and his role in the civil rights struggle. Take a look. Sharon Robinson, thank you so much for being here. Now, not only are you the daughter of baseball legend and civil rights icon Jackie Robinson, you grew up in the thick of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Now, what made you decide to write this memoir? It really concerns your coming of age in 1963. Why write it now?
I wanted to tell the story of the 1963 Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama. I wanted to share that story with children. I've worked for the past 50 years on helping kids find their voice. So I've been trying to find different ways to work with them on finding voice and why voice is important. And I just thought the Children's Crusade would be a way to do it. And then my editor helped me figure out the format, you know, and which voice to tell it in. He felt that as a memoir, it would work best. And as of writing it, I had to agree with him.
Yeah. Now, this book is geared toward middle grade readers, 8 to 12 and up. And your experience in that year, it was certainly critical. These teen years are hard enough without growing up the daughter of a superstar and a civil rights activist. Let's get into the story a little bit. It's 1963. You're 13 years old when Alabama Governor George Wallace made his infamous call for segregation. Where were you when that speech was delivered? And did you have a sense of what was happening at the time?
I was in our house, we had, I guess today you would call it a family room, but it was this room that was also our library. And that's where our television was, our family television. And we watched the 6 o'clock news together as a family. Unfortunately, my dad was not home, so normally he would be there to help me, guide me through these kinds of things. But I had my mother and my grandmother, so I was watching the news on television and heard it. And I was frightened of war because my older brother was not doing well, and I worried that he was going to go in the Army, be drafted in the Army. So I was very focused on war in the Vietnam coming up when I heard this announcement, and it frightened me, and I thought it was like a declaration of war.
Yeah. You write eloquently in the book about your struggle really with your own identity, what it meant to be an African American, growing up in a mostly white suburb, beautiful Connecticut suburb. What was that journey like? And when did you arrive at a sense of who you truly were? I suppose all of us during those teen years, you're kind of finding your way and defining yourself.
Absolutely. You know, it is a typical journey. For me, it was beginning like from 12 to 13, where I'm beginning to question everything and try to figure it out. The things that helped me was certainly my family and our family talks, but also it was Jack and Jill, which was a national organization for children, black children, and it was part social and part leadership development. So that kind of gave me a place to go with my peers at a time when black and white kids in teenage years split off, and they didn't socialize together. We had been great friends when we were in elementary school, but now things were changing, and I needed to find a group, and so that gave me a linkage to the black community.
Yeah, you tell the story of listening to records with your friend.
So really, but you know, it's an ongoing.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was an ongoing process. I wouldn't say I didn't really come of age fully until I got to Howard University, because it was a historically black college, and everyone there was, you know, striving and great discussions and worldview, and so that really helped me carry it over the edge. Into understanding who I was.
You write in the book of listening to records with your friend Candy during these early teen years, trying to figure out what it meant to be African American because you felt disconnected from the black community. Explain that experience, and what were you listening to?
Well, Motown. It was Motown Records. So Motown singers, performers. That gave us, because remember, our radio stations also played white music primarily. So this was our little 45 record players was our access to black music and the performers that we were loving, and that's when we started having parties and actually being able to play this music and dance to it. So it was a very important linkage.
Talk about your father for a moment, Sharon. Obviously a baseball legend to the rest of us.
Yes.
He broke racial barriers in Major League Baseball, ended segregation in the league. What do you remember most about him and his example? Was he simply dad, or were you aware of his stature and significance early on?
Combination. Being dad was the most important, but I was very much aware of his baseball years, but I didn't understand them. So for example, I knew my dad played baseball. I was too young.
Yeah.
I was 7, and when he retired, I was just turned 7. So I knew he was a baseball player. We had a trophy room. I had all kinds of, all the awards and the plaques and all of that. But it wasn't. I saw the Jackie Robinson story for the first time when I was in a day camp. And again, I was the only black kid in this camp, and I had no context to that early entry into baseball.
Wow.
And the racism he experienced. And it made me at that point say, wait a minute, what does this mean about the world I'm living in? So, but I was too, back then we didn't talk so much about our personal stuff. So I couldn't even ask my parents when I got home, what does this mean? I just had to keep trying to understand it as the years went by.
He was really, he made his name with his great athletic ability, breaking barriers, and then he became an activist. Is that the part of you is that the part of him that you most remember, where he was very engaged, he was in the media, he was, he was leading and a part of a movement?
Yeah, absolutely. So when my dad retired from Major League Baseball, and it was 1957, the civil rights movement was really heating up, and he put right into his contract that he was going to he needed time to travel and to support the movement. And he was working at Chalk-Full Nuts, vice president of personnel, and that they agreed to this. So he started, but he was an activist going way back, Raymond. Just think when he's playing, when he's was in the Army, and it was court-martialed for refusing to move to the back of the bus in Texas. So he had shown activism in him all of his life, even when he was a kid and couldn't figure out why they wouldn't let the black and brown kids swim in the public swimming pool. So he was always thinking as an activist, and even the integration of baseball was activism. And he just wanted to use that as leverage to help continue the change in the country.
Give me a sense of...
and that's who I knew. And wonderfully...
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say that when he would travel south, he would come home and share stories with us. So it brought us into the larger movement, even though we were, doing something on a much smaller basis in our own community in Stamford, Connecticut. He tried to bring us in, allow us into that movement by sharing stories.
Yeah. Walk me through the role of faith in your household. I know with Dr. King and really the entire civil rights movement, it was all predicated on faith. It was a religious as well as a moral drive. Give me a sense of what your father, Jackie Robinson, imparted to you.
Correct. Well, first of all, my dad came from a very religious upbringing. His mom was deeply religious, a praying woman. They had 5 things they had to do in house. They had to go to school, they had to work, they had to take care of their younger siblings, and they had to do their homework, and they had to pray every day. So my dad was a praying man, and faith was very much gave him the strength to carry forward on all of his challenges in life, from the professional ones to the personal ones. And so what my dad said to me, because I attended Sunday school every Sunday, but we went to the church in our community, so I walked to church every Sunday. And it didn't matter to me at all that I was in a white church, and I didn't really even understand that until I got to be the same teenage years when I realized My black friends were going to a black church, and then I went to a Baptist church, and I was like, oh, this is different, you know. But the church where I grew up, I loved it because it was like right in nature. You know, we would go into the woods and have, you know, special on sunrise service. You know, it's that kind of a small community church.
The child of the dream, your book
so
covers.
Faith was, you know, but my dad, I was just going to say, you know, Raymond, faith was very important in my house and prayer was important, but my dad also said it's how you live every day, Sharon. It's not whether you go to church every Sunday, it's how you live and how you treat people and how you give back to others. And that was really the major tenet in our house. So it was faith-based, certainly, but it was also service, you know, giving to others. Child
of the Dream, your book covers 1963 from your birthday in January through the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham. That's September. Now, so much happens in that 9-month span. You wanted to be part of the Children's March in Birmingham, but your father wouldn't let you go. What did he propose instead?
He came back from the Children's Crusade and having brought money down there and proposed that we as a family take on this mission. And the way he said we were going to do it is we're going to start doing a fundraiser at our house in Stamford, Connecticut. So, you know, we had a house with a lot of land and it was not that far from New York City. So we had our first of many jazz concerts to raise money for Dr. King in June of 1963. And it was a family effort. So he gave each of us a role. You know, Dave and I, and we all, the kids all had to clean their room so they have a place for the artists to change. And we had to, you know, Dave and I organized the other children to sell hot dogs and sodas. And my older brother helped my dad park cars and greet the guests. Wow. My mom was like overall, she was the directress. And it was the first time we sort of had this kind of a family effort. Yeah. And then in August, he also told us we were going to march. We were going to go to the March on Washington, and which we did as the entire family went. And that was a really unifying force for us as a family. And it did allow us to feel like we were part of the larger civil rights movement. So that was critical to our development.
Sharon, before I let you go, and the book is...
And then, you know, we had the second jazz concert in September. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
you're right about in the book. Before I let you go, Child of the Dream, it captures this really pivotal moment. But when I reflect on all this, I keep thinking of Dr. King's words that he wanted children to be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Do you worry that that part of the message has been lost, if you will, or somehow subverted?
Yes. Well, you know, what my dad taught me is that we were changing laws during the civil rights movement, but you can't legislate against hate. So what we had to work and the struggle was going to be an ongoing process. So yes, we are still fighting for equality, dignity for all people, you know, appreciation for differences, and just this equal America that we envisioned many years ago and Dr. King talked about. Certainly opportunity and access is, you know, always the biggest challenge.
Sharon Robinson, thank you so much for sharing your memories. The book is Child of the Dream, a memoir of 1963. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.